Hi, I'm Vyashti and I'm a junior at LHS. So, in the first three episodes, we showed you what it actually feels like to learn and work in our building right now, from students, teachers, and even Principal Baker. Today, we're going to go one level deeper. A lot of people think big school projects just happen with like random meetings and votes. Well, they don't. There's a very specific step by step framework that every Massachusetts town has to follow. So, in today's episode, we're going to talk through it with normal language, starting with LPS core values, the educational plan, the state partnership with the MSBA, and the integrated design process, which is the IDP, that turns the plan into actual rooms and square footage. My goal is just to show how all these pictures connect so families and students can see the bigger picture. First, educational plan. Think of it as the What Our Kids Deserve document written by our own teachers and students. Here's a short official clip that explains it.
Key step in the MSBA feasibility study is educational visioning from the community to identify the values and priorities that should be reflected in a new Lexington High School. Lexington had already done significant work in this area since 2017 with educational visioning, strategic planning, and a facilities master plan for the entire town. For a new high school, we also convened students, staff, administrators, town officials, and volunteers from the community to organize input and feedback in a series of visioning sessions. Their work went to the school building committee to create an educational plan in May 2024. It's a 112-page document that will guide designers in their development of site plans and schematics for a new high school. This educational plan includes considerations for the physical grounds, a safe, comfortable space that integrates the environment outside and inside, fosters collaboration, and makes use of the best technology. An enrollment capacity that accounts for Lexington's growth, authorized by the MSBA at 2,395 students. Dedicated spaces to support inclusion, English language learners, students with special needs, the METCO program, school counseling, nursing, and to welcome new families, as well as customized spaces for academic disciplines like humanities, art, math, and science, centered on collaboration and technology. Creation space for fine and performing arts, and integrated space for physical education and wellness. A library that serves not just as a media center and STEM space, but as a centralized learning commons for collaborative learning, and a family welcome center to serve all newcomers to Lexington Public Schools. All designed in a sustainable way to achieve LEED Gold Net Zero certification, using the best practices of renewable energy and waste reduction.
The educational plan is part of the MSBA's process when you get into a partnership with them. So essentially, they ask the partner district to develop an educational plan. And the purpose for that is that they want the school system to dictate really to the architects and the designers how the school should be, or what the educational needs are for that community. So we start by writing an ed plan. The way that we worked in Lexington is we had a draft. It ended up being around 150 pages, and the educational plan was developed in partnership with members of the school community, the high school. Every teacher in every department had a say in sort of what went into the ed plan. And we create this document, and the document then is given to the architects and designers. They work with us to refine the educational plan. From that educational plan, which essentially maps out what the school could be, they develop a program adjacencies diagram, which shows spatial relationships between departments and disciplines. And we're thinking a lot about interdisciplinary connections in the new school. And we also go through a process where they identify every space, every bit of square footage that exists in the building now, and what the demands are on that space and what additional space is needed. And we do this in the context of guidelines from the MSBA. So it's not as if we can take an educational plan and put in anything that we want to in it, and that's what gets designed. It doesn't work that way. The MSBA has guidelines on square footage, and they set parameters so you can't exceed guidelines without fully funding, or the town fully funding a particular addition. So for example, in our educational plan, the guideline for classroom space is no bigger than 950 square feet. Currently at the high school, our square footage is about 700 for a classroom size of about 24, 25 students. So it's very small, very tiny. In our educational plan, we could have gone up to 950 square feet per classroom. We didn't. We went to 850 square feet. So this is an example of how we've taken some conservative measures to keep the project in line. The other thing that I would say about the educational plan is that it doesn't account for kind of the wish list of items. Some people assume that this is all about the wants and the desires of the school system rather than the needs. And I would say that it's very needs-based. There are limitations on how big a gymnasium can be, how large the large core spaces like a cafeteria or the Performing Arts Center, for example, can be. Anything that goes beyond what the square footage guidelines are has to be contemplated in the context of the school building committee. We have to have a conversation and have had conversations, for example, about special education. We needed more square footage in that area because our program is so big. In some areas, performing arts is, major in the Lexington community. We had to look and see what could we do that is slightly above in order to meet the needs and demands. And actually by slightly above, it's exactly as we have.
Okay, so we have this clear vision for what learning at LHS should feel like. But how did we even get to the point of talking about a whole new building at all? This short clip gives the backstory.
Here's how we got to the schematic design phase of the MSBA process. The high school was selected into the highly competitive MSBA core program in March 2022, after our town made the case that the existing high school had reached the end of its useful life. The original building is in its 8th decade of service, with an unsustainable design, aging systems, and overcrowding, all of which cannot execute a next-generation educational program for our high school students. Upon acceptance, our town began meeting the requirements set out by the MSBA to qualify for reimbursement, approving funding for a feasibility study, forming a school building committee of school administrators, town leaders, and community members, and hiring a project team which includes an owner's project manager and architectural design firm. We then embarked on a comprehensive effort to hear from the community through a series of community informational sessions, focus groups, and most importantly, in a visioning process where we invited educators, students, and community members to capture the needs a new high school should serve, both educationally for our students and to the greater community. Our school building committee took all of this feedback to create an educational plan, which directed the design team to create several options of renovation, addition, and/or replacement of the high school. The project team presented 19 different options, which the school building committee evaluated with a detailed scoring system driven by this educational plan. They identified 7 options for the project team to develop further, from which the school building committee selected its single preferred solution.
A huge part of that story is the state program that helps towns pay for school buildings. That's the MSBA. Here's what the partnership actually means for Lexington.
The rare opportunity to fund a new high school construction project with the MSBA. The MSBA is a state authority that helps local school districts pay for the design and construction of schools. It's competitive and needs-based. When Lexington High School was accepted into the program in 2022, 118 schools applied. Lexington was one of only 17 projects across the Commonwealth selected. The acceptance rate that year was just 14%. The work is tough, but the payoff is significant. By completing the MSBA marathon, we will unlock about $100 million in grants that won't come out of our local property tax assessments. Upon being selected, we immediately began meeting eligibility requirements, like forming a school building committee of school administrators, town officials, and volunteers. We also selected a project manager and an architect, which, with the school building committee, form our project team. The project team's first job, a feasibility study to determine Lexington's physical and educational needs to deliver a next-generation education for our young people. In Lexington Public Schools, our vision is joy.
The why and part of how we pay for the MSBA.
Engaged community who values education and values the future of our town and wants to have a say and have their voices heard in the direction we go. We've made a comprehensive approach to engaging with all of these stakeholders. Earlier, I think it was in the summer, we sent out a letter to various groups, the select board, the recreation committee, capital expenditures, the appropriation committee, Sustainable Lexington, our PTO president's organization, to set aside time to identify here are the times we're going to meet with your groups and with representatives of the school building committee as well as part of our design team, so that you have this opportunity to tell us what is important to you and we can answer your questions, because recognizing that what the PTO presidents might view as an essential item that they want to have addressed might be different than something that Sustainable Lexington would want. And we just want to make sure that all of the voices are heard and we're taking all of that feedback into consideration as we move forward, because ultimately we want a project that is supported and embraced by the entire community. Just, this process has been going on for a long time, and I don't mean just from when we got invited into the MSBA, in our first SBC meeting back in September 2022. We're going back to 1999.
Integrated design construction policy. The educational plan says what teaching and learning is needed. The IDP is the big teamwork phrase that turns what into how much space, what kinds of rooms, and which problems the building has to solve. So the real order is LPS core values, the educational plan, the MSBA partnership, the integrated design and construction policy, and the actual design choices like Bloom. So every single detail has to follow that path. So yeah, that's a lot of steps and acronyms, but the main takeaway is simple. This project isn't random. It starts with what Lexington says every student deserves. It is shaped by thousands of us through the IDP and has to follow strict state rules to get any funding help. In the next episodes, we're going to move from the framework to the experience. First, with how the proposed Bloom building tries to fix issues like air, light, and noise, and then with a student-led myths versus reality conversation about fields, costs, and what's actually true. Thank you for watching, and I hope this helped connect some of those dots.